Luz y progreso, paz y justicia. This is Sancista Brujo Luis, and I feel like I haven't done a video in a long time. Sorry. So the reason why I'm coming out of my little summer hibernation is because I got a comment, an interesting comment or a question on one of my TikTok videos, and I'm going to leave it either up there or somewhere around here. The person, the follower, his name is Roman Toro, and he asks, and you can see it right there, what is the difference between Kardecianista espiritistas, Kardecian spiritists, and Espiritismo Criollo folk spiritism? So I want to take a moment to elaborate and explain here on this video. Now first, before I can answer that question, I want people to understand that Kardecianistas is not really Puerto Rican Espiritismo, it's not Cuban Espiritismo, is not Brazilian Espiritismo, it's not Espiritismo as practiced here in the Americas. Kardecianistas is the form of spiritism that was created by Hipólito León de Revalle, pen name Allan Kardec, and it was brought in around the later parts of the 1800s, and it was brought into the Americas via contraband, right, hidden, right, by people, often aristocratic families from Puerto Rico and Cuba and Brazil that went to study in the 1800s in Spain, in Portugal, and they brought these books, the codification of Allan Kardec via contraband into the Caribbean. So Kardecismo or Kardecianistas is a form of spiritism that was created in the later 1800s in France and brought to the Americas, and it is practiced in Puerto Rico, it is practiced in Cuba, it is practiced in Brazil, but when I'm talking about Espiritismo Criollo as it developed in Puerto Rico, Espiritismo Criollo, Espiritismo Folclórico, Espiritismo Popular de la Isla, that is the form of spiritism that developed, that grew out of the consciousness of our people on the island, the same way that Espiritismo developed in Cuba with Espiritismo Cruzado, Espiritismo del Cordón, Espiritismo de la Caridad. In Brazil, they have Mesa Blanca, the same way we do in Puerto Rico. I mean, they also have Umbanda in Brazil and other forms of Espiritismo. So Kardecianistas, they focus more on the science of the world of spirit. They focus on philosophy. They focus on social changes within not just the island of Puerto Rico, but in Cuba and Brazil. They focus on enlightenment, social changes. And yes, Espiritismo or folk spiritism, Espiritismo puertorriqueño, Espiritismo popular, Espiritismo criollo, Espiritismo de la Mesa Blanca, they can focus on these things, but these are not the main core of what we focus on. So from now on, to make the video a little bit easier and understandable, I'm going to use the term Espiritismo puertorriqueño, Puerto Rican spiritism, instead of using Espiritismo criollo, Espiritismo folclórico, Espiritismo popular, Espiritismo de la Mesa Blanca, just so it's easier for people to understand. So while Kardecianistas focus on enlightenment, philosophy, social changes, the Puerto Rican Espiritista, the ones who practice La Mesa Blanca, we focus more on the spiritual practice of the island. So the Puerto Rican Espiritista is more an earth-based spiritual practitioner, more so than a philosopher. And that doesn't mean that there are Espiritistas in Puerto Rico that practice La Mesa Blanca that do engage in philosophy and social change, but we focus more on the spiritual practice. Many practitioners of Puerto Rican Espiritismo also incorporate altars. You will see altars known as La Mesa, El Santuario. Some people call it La Bóveda. That comes from Cuba. And there That's something that you do not see in Kardecianismo, Espiritismo. You don't see altars like that in Kardecianismo. Also, we focus on magical earth traditions. We incorporate santiguarismo, sobadores, curanderismo, hierbería. Hierbería is herbalism, and we also incorporate some forms of divination, which you will never find a Kardecianista practice. Kardecianistas, they often focus on the spiritual guides, the spirits. And yes, in Espiritismo, Puerto Rican Espiritismo, we do focus on los guías, los seres, los protectores, as we call them. But we also incorporate in Puerto Rican Espiritismo indigenous spirits, African spirits, spirits from other traditions such as Hinduism, spirits from Buddhism, spirits from other culture that you will not see in Kardecianismo. Many practitioners of Puerto Rican Espiritismo also incorporate other religious facets or religions that they might partake in. Many Espiritistas de la Mesa Blanca Puerto Rican Espiritismo, you'll see that they are Catholics, they could be Pentecostal, or they could be from other traditions such as Sanse, Santerismo, Seminismo, 21 Division, and some Puerto Rican Espiritistas do also incorporate Santeria traditions and other earth-based traditions that would be labeled as brujeria, folk magic in the island, where you will not see that in Kardecianismo. In fact, many Kardecianistas often view these traditions that I just mentioned as backwards traditions, wayward traditions, that has nothing to do with spiritual development. So while a Kardecianista may have an Indian spirit guide, in Puerto Rican Espiritismo, which is not done in Kardecianismo, if we have an Indian spirit guide, if we have an African spirit guide, if we have a spirit that may have been Hindu or Gypsy, we also incorporate those spiritual philosophies that spirit may have lived. For example, if I have spirits, Indian spirits in mi cuadro espiritual, which I do, then I gravitate towards a lot of native traditions. If you have a Hindu spirit guide, then Hinduism would call you. Egyptian spirit guides, Egyptian spirituality or magic or whatever it is might call you. In Kardecianismo, they do not do that. So while the Kardecianistas are often against superstition or spiritual beliefs passed down, let's say, from the Tainos or from the African slaves that were brought into the Caribbean or other cultures that were brought into the Caribbean, in Puerto Rican Espiritismo, en la Mesa Blanca, we embrace it, we weave it into our own fabric, our own form of Espiritismo. Kardecianistas often gather in what is known or labeled as a templo espiritista. That, of course, can happen in Puerto Rican Espiritismo. We do have templo espiritistas in Puerto Rican Espiritismo, but you will often hear that we gather in centro espiritistas, which are much smaller than these elaborate templos. We gather in people's apartment buildings for smaller gatherings and also in people's homes. Kardecianistas often call their gatherings reuniones espirituales or espirita, and sesiones espiritista or espírita, while in Puerto Rican Espiritismo, we call it una mesa. Vamos a atender una mesa. La mesa is named after the white table, la Mesa Blanca. Some people use the term misa, which comes from Cuban Espiritismo. We do also have sesiones. We have veladas, spiritual vigils. We do rosarios. We do novenarios that they do not really do in Kardecianismo. And many Puerto Rican Espiritistas do practice private sesiones for individuals. Kardecianistas work with the spirit world, and they label them as seres, protectores, y guías. And in Puerto Rican Espiritismo, we also use the terms seres, protectores, y guías. But there's one thing that we have in Puerto Rican Espiritismo, and in Cuban Espiritismo, and in Brazilian Espiritismo, and in other forms of folk spiritism that is not in Kardecianismo. We put these spirits in subgroups, right? That we label them as casas, emisarios, cortes espirituales, or comisiones espirituales, or comisiones espiritistas. And we label our spirit guides, right? Some people, la familia espiritual, el cuadro espiritual, the spiritual quadrant, or the spiritual frame. So these are just a few of the differences between Kardecianismo, which was brought to the Caribbean and other parts of the world from France, right? How they practice it and how it developed and became its own thing in Puerto Rico, Puerto Rican Espiritismo, whether it's Mesa Blanca, Criollo, Popular, or Folklorico, or Espiritismo as practiced in Cuba and Brazil, which has many traditions. Anyways, if anyone else has any questions on anything that's spiritual or magical that has to do with Espiritismo or folk magic as practiced in the Caribbean, leave your questions and I might pick yours for the next video. San Sisto Brujo Luis, ciao. Enjoy your summer y happy Pride.